In Sweden, a woman has died after what police believe may be the latest in a series of explosions linked to a gang war.
Och först ikväll om att polisen nu trappar upp jakten på de kriminella som tillverkar och säljer bomber.
Efter helgens 3 explosioner i Malmö så har det nu sammanlagt genomförts 187 sprängningar i Sverige bara i år.
You have everything here. You have like old German Luger gun, you have Kalashnikov, we have even grenades, as you can see here, like an armory of like everything.
This event follows a pattern observed in recent years, where Sweden has experienced numerous bombings, with some sources indicating this year alone has seen over 100 such incidents up to a certain point.
Today I'm going to be talking about what the hell is going on in Sweden. As someone who's worked in the private and public sectors of security for about 20 years with extensive experience throughout all of Europe, I've been in and out of Sweden many times, and I can personally attest to how violent it's become over the last, say, decade. A country that was regularly voted one of the happiest, safest places on earth is now one of the most dangerous places in all of Europe. Sweden averages a bombing every 1 to 3 days. It has the most shootings of any European country outside of Albania, and it is the rape capital of Europe when you look at it per capita. But most people outside of Sweden have no idea this is even a thing, or that it's occurring. You never really see it on international news segments, and when you do, it's usually a small blip, very short segment. And even people inside of Europe in the security sectors often do not understand or even know that these types of things are going on. So today, I'm talking about what the hell is going on in Sweden. All right, let's start with the bombings. Until 2015, I simply could not find any series of events with any regularity on bombings in Sweden. So much so that the Swedish government literally doesn't seem to have any published data on events because they simply weren't a thing. You didn't have regular bombings going on in Sweden for the government to even keep track of it. Then in 2015, you can see that they take off in frequency and never really stop. Until today, where there is a bombing in Sweden once every 1 to 3 days on average. Now, with all violent crime in Sweden, it seems to be concentrated in the southern parts of the country. In fact, you can almost draw an imaginary line halfway up the country, and just about all violent crime seems to be on the bottom side of the line, with very little above it. The bombs themselves are mostly hand grenades, which are coming from Eastern Europe and are rather old, mainly from various Balkan wars. But the explosives also include homemade explosives, homemade bombs, IEDs. Unfortunately, these devices are used everywhere, from restaurants, homes, stairwells, and apartment complexes, crowds of people. They seem to be fairly indiscriminate with this, and unfortunately, it makes securing the areas and the people incredibly difficult.
Morning, Englishman who lives in Sweden. What a night they've had in Sweden. A house, an apartment, hairdresser's shop, and a kiosk. All bombed. Yes. 4 bombs last night in Sweden. 4 fucking bombs in the space of 2.5 hours. Wow.
From a security standpoint, this is a completely new kind of threat. Typically, we only see explosive threats in areas with armed security. Military, government, VVIPs, that sort of thing. We don't typically see explosive levels of threats at pizzerias, apartment complexes, and various civilian areas. This is incredibly new and also incredibly difficult to fix. If you have on-site armed security who have permission to shoot somebody who's actively using a rifle or about to throw a hand grenade, that's one thing. But when you're talking about innocent civilians in residential areas, inside their own homes, inside of a restaurant, these assholes usually just show up, shoot people, throw a hand grenade, and run off, which makes securing the residential areas and the people extremely difficult. Because you don't have an unlimited budget and you don't have an unlimited number of security personnel.
Right behind us right here, there was a guy that was shot in the pizzeria. He was shot by a 16-year-old who came into the pizzeria and wearing a face mask and shot him from behind on point blank distance. And then just like 100 meters up here to the left, there was another person who was 19 years old who was shot death in a stairway.
Think of it this way. A random person living in an apartment, or a small business owner who owns a kiosk or a pizzeria or something similar, you very likely cannot afford to replace all your doors with blast doors, replace all your windows with high-grade ballistic glass that can withstand explosives, and you clearly aren't allowed to form your own armed watch that's patrolling the neighborhoods. So from an individual level, you're pretty much powerless to do anything about this. Another way to look at this is to simply say that it's estimated that in 2024, Baghdad saw between 150 and 250 bombings or explosive attacks. Sweden, however, in the same year, saw an estimated 317. So yes, you're comparing a major city to a country, but it puts things into perspective, or at least it should, on the sheer frequency and scale that this is actually happening. In regards to firearms and firearm-related deaths, Sweden now has the most gun homicides out of any place in Europe outside of Albania. Now, yes, Albania is definitely far and ahead above Sweden, but it does still show you that Sweden, one of the regularly voted happiest, safest places on Earth, is now subject to basically daily bombings, the most shootings and gun homicides or attempted homicides anywhere in Europe, and it's not seemingly getting any better. And when you talk to people who say, well, yeah, but crime is down from last year, well, it doesn't matter if it's down from last year. What you really need to be concerned about is, what was it 10, 20, 30 years ago? Because if it increases 1,000% in a year, and then the following year it goes down by 10%, that's still horrifically bad. So again, look at this graph on the bombings, right? If you said, well, okay, but now the graph is going to go down by 10%, well, does it matter? It's still wildly too high and far higher than it was any time prior to 2015. Now, due to censorship, I cannot use the big R word here, but I trust everyone understands what it is that I'm talking about, and seeing as how this is a story about Sweden, I will simply reuse their word for this, which I believe is pronounced volta.
Volta.
Or, well, my terrible American pronunciation of it. Sweden does have a serious volta problem, and it seems to only be getting worse, with 1 in 4 Swedish girls unfortunately being subjected to this. Now, in my opinion, as an American, I would prefer to see Swedish girls become extremely hard targets and be able to arm themselves. But in Europe's infinite wisdom, that simply isn't allowed. In fact, in many European countries, a girl will be fined or can even go to jail for having something like pepper spray in an attempt to defend herself from somebody who actually wants to subject her to this. What is apparently allowed, however, and this is unfortunate at the heart of the matter, is the incredibly soft punishment for violent offenders. The combination of not allowing your populace to defend themselves and being incredibly soft on crime naturally leads to an increase in said crime, which is bad enough, but in this case we're specifically referencing extremely violent crime. To give you an example of what I am referencing, here's a story of an Eritrean man who vaulted a 16-year-old Swedish girl and will not be deported because, according to the courts, the volta didn't last long enough to be considered serious enough for forcing him to return to his country. There are simply no words for the level of indignation one must feel when reading stories like this. But for criminals who know that the punishment will be extremely lenient for violent crimes, it's an encouragement. And so this is where, as a security advisor, I find myself at a loss for recommendations on how to resolve these issues, because it seems that everything is being set up to encourage and continue exactly what you're seeing today.